It is that time of the week once again as we welcome you to the NFC West Huddle, going around the horn and checking in with the folks covering each team in their respective market. I'm Aaron Levine in Seattle, joined by Gerard Moncure in Los Angeles, Richard Sines in Phoenix, and Bailey O'Carroll in the Bay Area. Guys, it's week 2 in the NFL. Both the Seahawks and Niners winning their openers. The Rams and Cardinals both going on the road and losing nail-biters to very talented teams. So the first question for everyone here: did your team that you cover live up to expectations, exceed expectations, or underperform in week 1, and why? Gerard, we're going to start with you.
Well, I think when you look at the Rams-Lions game, it's a mixed bag for the Rams. That first half, 3 points, completely unacceptable. Matthew Stafford threw a red zone interception. They squandered some other opportunities, which is the exact reason why they lost the playoff game last year in the wild card round. Then you go to the second half, and they had, obviously, Puka Nacua, offensive lineman Joe Noteboom, and Steve Avila all out of the game, and they make the rally. They actually take the lead with 4.5 minutes left, and they're one play away, another first down from really winning the game, from icing it. And so that was very impressive. The grit. This is a young team, the second youngest team in the league, and they kind of found their footing a little bit. Their confidence grew as the game went along. Obviously, they get to overtime. They were a 5-point favorite, or pardon me, underdog, and they end up losing the game by 6 points as the Lions drive down the field against an exhausted defense that is a little thin because they're so young. So the second half was great. The first half, unacceptable. So kind of a mixed bag for the Rams in that week 1 against a very good Lions team, by the way, which some think are going to be in the Super Bowl this year.
Absolutely. And Richard, a similar situation with the Cardinals taking the Bills down to the wire on the road.
Yeah, very similar situation when you consider, the Cardinals, gave the Bills all they could handle. It was a tale of two halves, just like that Rams game. The Cardinals get the ball first. They have a nice long drive. They score a touchdown on their opening drive. Kyler Murray looks cool and calm in the pocket. Cardinals are up 7-0 to start the game. Then on defense, the first possession for the Bills, the local boy, Roy Lopez, forces a fumble of Josh Allen. Cardinals recover, turn that into a field goal. The Cardinals were up 17-3 at one point, and I started to think, are the Cardinals going to win this game? Because the Cardinals hardly ever win when they go on the East Coast. And then I felt like Al Pacino in The Godfather. Right when I think I'm out, they suck me back in, right? I start thinking, they're going to win this game. And then all of a sudden, the Bills score right before the half. Then they score on their opening drive in the second half. That was a 14-point turnaround. Then the Cardinals, get a long kickoff return for a touchdown, 96 yards. DJ Dallas. Hey, Mr. DJ. You're thinking, all right, Cardinals are back in it. Then all of a sudden, they don't execute down the stretch. They come up short. A roller coaster of emotions. Like I said, once you think you're out, they suck you back in. The Cardinals break your heart like they did in week 1. But they played well, a lot of good things that they could feel good about heading into week 2.
Yeah, a lot of people in survivor leagues holding their collective breaths in that one. And fortunately, for them at least, the Bills coming out on top. And Bailey, a pretty convincing home win even without Christian McCaffrey on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I got to say the special teams, I think, exceeded expectations. Jake Moody had himself a night with 6 field goals. Kyle Shanahan did point out in practice yesterday that one of those did bounce off the goal post there, but it's okay. 6. This is a pretty good night at the office. I think the offense exceeded expectations. I think once everybody found out that CMC was going to be out, there was kind of everybody was holding their breath, right? We didn't know what Jordan Mason was capable of. He had himself a night, right? He had a rush for 147 yards, a touchdown. We almost didn't really realize that CMC wasn't there. We didn't miss him, which is, of course, a good thing, at least for week 1. And then this defense is so incredibly talented at just about every position. So I think that my expectations for this defense are sky high, like many other people's around the league. So I think they met those expectations. I think the defense, I was talking to Fred yesterday after practice, or rather before practice, and he told me there's certainly things that they can work on. They don't want to get too ahead of themselves, but they were overall happy with the week 1 performance.
Well, as for the Seahawks, I think the offense and special teams underperformed. The defense exceeded expectations, but overall a ton of optimism with this new-look Seahawks team. I know they were facing a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, but the tackling and pass coverage is night and day from last season. I mean, this defense forced 8 3-and-outs. They kept the team in the game when the offense made early mistakes. This is the kind of defense Seattle needs if they're going to compete with the Kyle Shanahans and Sean McVays in this division. And on offense, give Ryan Grubb a ton of credit for being able to make necessary adjustments. Ken Walker rushing for 84 yards after halftime. Shane Waldron struggled to make these kinds of adjustments throughout the game when he was offensive coordinator. Grubb represents a major improvement at that offensive coordinator position. So now we turn the corner to this weekend. The Niners and Seahawks hitting the road. Our first head-to-head divisional matchup as the Rams head to Arizona. Let's have each of you preview these games from your perspective. Richard, no one wants to start the season 0-2, especially with the home game this week.
Yeah, and the Cardinals have a tough draw right here with the Rams, right? It's going to be a tough start to this season for the Cardinals, right? You're on the road at Buffalo week 1, come back home facing the Rams, a team that's had your number over the years. Then you got the Lions coming in after that, so you got to find a way to squeak out a win one way or the other here, and the Rams could be that team, right? You got to beat the teams within your division, but the one thing that the Cardinals have to do is stop the run. That's one thing they've had trouble with. So that D-line has been suspect, for a couple of years now for the Arizona Cardinals. And Kyrie Williams is going to want to run the ball, and that's what the Rams have done over the years against the Cardinals. So you have to stop the run on defense, make some plays on offense, and hopefully Kyler Murray can play like he did in the first half for 4 quarters in this game, because you don't want to go down 0-2 like you said, Aaron, and then you don't want to lose a division game as well. But for some reason, the Rams have had the Cardinals' number for the last couple of years.
And Gerard, it's not easy starting the season with 2 straight road games, but what are your expectations this week for the Rams?
Well, I think for the Rams, it's actually a must-win if they want to keep those division title hopes alive. They've got the Niners coming into SoFi next week. So if you lose to the Cardinals, and then you lose to the Niners in the next week, forget about the division, and then your playoff hopes are behind the 8 ball to start the year 3 weeks in. So I think that's how they see this game as a must-win. Now, obviously, Kyler Murray is public enemy number 1 for the Rams defense this week. In the past, they've had great success containing him, but there was a guy on the team then by the name of Aaron Donald, who was Kyler Murray's Freddy Krueger. Well, he's in retirement now. So the rest of these guys know that containment and discipline are the keys Sunday. I spoke with Jared Verse, their top draft pick, kind of one of the leaders on the defense, even though he is a youngster. And they know we have to play disciplined football. We have to contain Tyler Murray, and we have to tackle together. Hold the edges, use teamwork, and that's the way that they've contained him in the past. They've studied a lot of film already, and they know that that is the mission on Sunday if they want to come out of Arizona, out of Glendale with a W.
And Bailey, the Niners go to Minnesota against a Vikings team that handled the Giants on the road. How's it looking for the Niners this week?
Yeah, I don't think they look too strongly at that Giants game. The Giants, obviously, and the Niners, 2 very, very different teams when it comes to talent. I think everybody could probably agree with that. But I think that this could be a trap game for this Niners team, right? They do know one of the things all the guys were talking about in the locker room yesterday before practice is that they remember that this Vikings team beat them last season, left a sour taste in their mouth, so they don't want history to repeat itself when it comes to that. I think number one thing, they want to make sure that they protect Brock Purdy. Obviously, Trent Williams is doing his job. You need him to have another great night. I think there's a stat here, I actually read Kyle Juszczyk after the game, that on every single pressure attempt, which there was 33 of them, Trent did not allow anybody to touch Brock. So that's, I think, a key to this game. And then I think Sam Darnold, right, who was Brock's backup last year on the Niners. Of course, he's starting now this year for the Vikings. So they're very familiar with Sam's game. He looked like a starting NFL quarterback last week. I think another key is going to be if Nick Bosa can get to Sam Darnold. In Bosa certainly making that a point yesterday that obviously that is one of his goals for this year. He had 3 sacks against the Vikings last year and looking to repeat that, if not get even more, right, in this matchup. So I don't think it's a must-win, but I think it certainly could serve as kind of a trap game. And right now, the team's mindset is they don't want to get ahead of themselves, right? They were happy with their performance in week 1. They want to turn the page and start fresh for week 2.
Yeah, it's something going from the Giants to the Niners. I mean, the Giants, my favorite stat, Daniel Jones has more pick sixes in the last 7 games than touchdown passes for his own team. It's incredible. He's 1-6, just 1 win in his last 7 games for the Giants. And the Seahawks at the Patriots this week. It was announced that Malcolm Butler, the hero of Super Bowl 49, will be joined with 20 of his teammates from that year's team. They'll ring the bell atop the stadium's new lighthouse. Listen, it's been 10 years and Seahawks fans still aren't over the end of that game. It would be a great way to further exercise those demons with a win on Sunday. I love how we're going from the 2 oldest coaches in the NFL, Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick, to the 2 youngest in Mike McDonald and Gerard Mayo. But I think this is going to be a defensive battle with 2 very disciplined teams on defense. Both are great at putting hat on a hat. Both teams have some injuries on the offensive line, so I think the team that wins this game will be the one whose front 7 can take advantage of those injuries on the other team, get a solid push up front, make it hard on the run game. I think this game comes down to the wire, but the Seahawks will go on to win it by less than 1 score. It will be a very tight game. We're just getting started on this NFC West huddle. After the break, we're going to look at each team's biggest underperformer from week 1 and what that player needs to do to get back on track in week 2. Well, back here on the NFC West Huddle as we count down to week 2 in the NFC West. Whether fantasy football is your game or you're just a diehard fan, there was at least one player who underperformed in week 1 and likely feels pressure to get it going this week. So let's go around the division. We're going to start with Bailey this time. Who is the player on the 49ers who needs to step up in week number 2?
I think if you're a fantasy owner, you're just hoping that Christian McCaffrey plays week 2, right? So it is kind of seeming like that's going to be a game time decision. He did tell us yesterday that he is preparing like he's going to play week 2, but Kyle Shanahan kind of alluding that they're going to kind of wait and see and possibly pump the brakes, but they're preparing like CMC is going to play. So I'm sure fantasy owners are happy to see that, or hear that rather. But I think one guy who kind of underperformed, who needs to step it up this next week, would be Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, everybody saw that drop in the end zone. He said that Brock threw that one was a dime, and he actually did tell us that he was afraid to watch the film on this week 1 matchup against the Jets because he knows that he messed up. And I think given all the noise kind of that was surrounding him and this team in the offseason, I think people really expected like, hey, he just got paid. He's going to come out and have a monster week 1 performance. But you got to keep in mind that, right, he missed training camp. He missed all of the preseason. So he didn't have that time to prepare with Brock like all the other receivers did. So I think everybody's kind of looking for him to step up in week 2 and be the Brandon Ayuk that they saw and loved so much in last season.
Gerard, who on the Rams needs to get it going in Arizona this week?
Well, I'm going to make it a combination, the offensive line and Kyren Williams. Now, obviously, the O-line in the second half against the Lions was missing 2-3 starters. But to be honest with you, 23 carries for 83 yards is not acceptable. Kyren Williams on 18 carries averaged 2.8 yards a carry. That's not going to get it done. You cannot have Matthew Stafford against any defense throwing in predictable situations where everyone in the country watching the game knows he's going to throw the ball. He threw the ball 49 times against the Lions. That's too many times. He's 36 years old. You're going to get the guy killed back there with this type of production from your run game. So it's an overall combination of the O-line, despite the guys are going to be in there as substitutes this week, and Kyren, they've got to find a way to run the ball much more successfully than they did against the Lions.
And Richard, can I guess that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be your answer to this question?
Exactly, right? That was a no-brainer, right? If you draft a guy 4th overall, your top pick, with a nickname of Maserati Marv, you don't leave him in the garage. If I got a Maserati, I'm going to put the pedal to the metal, drive it till the wheels fall off on the highway, and then go real slow when I'm in the neighborhood, 5 miles an hour, so everybody sees me in the car, right? I mean, you got to use Marvin Harrison Jr. He only had 1 catch for 4 yards, 3 targets. It was mind-boggling to see his lack of production production and his lack of involvement in the offensive game plan. That's been a hot topic all week long. We've heard, Kyler Murray talk about it. We heard head coach Jonathan Gannon talk about it. We've heard offensive coordinator Drew Petzing talk about it. And just yesterday, Marvin Harrison Jr. talked about it. He's such a pro. He handled it really well. He says, look, I'm going to get mine. I just got to be patient. And that's what they're preaching to him. The ball will eventually come his way. But at least give it to him on a reverse, a screen pass or something. I know he dropped his first pass, but hey, he's a rookie. Even the great Larry Fitzgerald didn't have a 100-yard game in any of his games in his rookie season. Didn't get his first touchdown catch till week 5. So it takes a while, but give the kid a chance. Throw him the ball. He's such a great talent. He was the star of training camp, and now you get to the real games, you don't even throw him the ball. It didn't really make a lot of sense, so I think he'll be much more involved in the offensive game plan this week, that's for sure, and I can't wait to see it.
I can't wait to see you in a Maserati going 5 miles an hour down in your neighborhood. You've got to make that happen sometime. And speaking of wide receivers.
With the windows down, so you see who's driving it.
I love it. Speaking of wide receivers, it has to be DK Metcalf for the Seahawks. Just 3 catches for 29 yards for DK in week 1. He also dropped a deep pass. That was surprising because that was the kind of play he was making throughout all of training camp. And when I tell you he was a beast in camp, that was an understatement, and no one could stop him during the month of August. And we're talking about a really good secondary, which we saw in week 1. They restructured his deal, but he's still costing the Seahawks $15 million against the cap this season, close to $32 million next season. He needs to live up to that kind of money and put up bigger numbers. I think last week was a product of having to go up against Patrick Surtain for the entire game that week against the Broncos. So a much more favorable matchup this week, and it's one the Seahawks need to exploit against New England. Up next, I've got a few statements for our panel as we play a quick game of fair or foul. That's coming up next here on the NFC West Huddle. Well, it's one of our favorite games to play on Washington Sports Wrap each week, so we're going to do it on the NFC West Huddle tonight as well. As we welcome you back, I've got a statement for each of you. I'm going to go around the horn and ask one at a time. You tell me whether you agree with it by saying fair or foul, and then explain why. Richard, I'm going to start with you. Kyler Murray, now back from that torn ACL this season. He had 57 rushing yards in week 1. Murray will finish the season with more than 500 total rushing yards this year. Is that fair or foul?
I think that's fair. I definitely think that's fair because, he still has the wheels, right? He's back. He had the injury, but he's rehab. He's attacked his rehab, and he looked good. I mean, he's looked good in training camp. You can tell when he takes off and runs, he still has that burst, and that's still a major weapon for him. But now I think he's got, help with James Conner, Marvin Harrison Jr., hopefully Trey McBride to open up the field to give him opportunities to run. And I think when things break down, which they tend to do, he can still take off and run and still keep defenses on their heels. So, yes, I think that's fair. Take the over on that. He even said take the over on the wins, which was like around 8 or 9, but I'm not sure about that one just yet. But I'll take the over on the rushing yards, that's for sure.
Yeah, he hasn't reached 500 rushing yards since 2020, but he had 819 rushing yards and 11 rushing scores that season. Bailey, you're next. The Christian McCaffrey Achilles tendonitis injury will end up being a bigger issue throughout this season and beyond, more than we expected. Is that going to be fair or foul?
Okay, so I've been going back and forth on this one. I'm gonna say fair just because, I've had some experience with Achilles tendonitis, and I know it can just be a really pesky, easy to kind of tweak injury. It's not like a broken bone, right, where you just throw a cast on it, it'll heal up in a certain amount of time, right? Tendons are a little tough. Now, we know it's Christian McCaffrey. He will play through almost whatever, especially if this still is an issue come playoffs. I don't doubt that he will play through it. I think they're kind of taking it easy. He referred to it as kind of a chess move. Let him sit week 1, maybe even week 2 and week 3, and then week 4 they have the Patriots. So there isn't an automatic need for him. But yeah, I do think it's fair. I think that this could be a lingering issue, even if the team doesn't talk about it a whole lot. I think it could be an issue come long term in the season.
Yeah, fantasy owners holding their collective breaths on that one. And Gerard, yours is this one. Demarcus Robinson will benefit more than anyone else given the injury to Puka Nacua, which will keep him out for at least the next 4 weeks. Is that fair or foul?
Definitely fair. Demarcus Robinson picked up his role last year when Cooper Kupp was out. So he already has a rep with Matthew Stafford. 4 catches, 42 yards in the Detroit game. So he's already integrated into the offense. Matthew Stafford trusts him from last season. So along with Tyler Johnson, who came off the practice squad and had a big game the other night, 5 catches, 79 yards, a 63-yarder. If the Rams are going to have a serious injury and sending a key player to the IR, the one place they could probably get away with it is the wide receiver room, because these other guys had gotten playing time last year and they're familiar with Matthew Stafford. He trusts them. So yeah, Demarcus Robinson, as long as he stays healthy, on his way to probably a big season.
And my producer gave me this one about the Seahawks. The statement is Geno Smith will throw for 4,000 yards or more this season, fair or foul. That's a tough one for me because passing yards are down across the league after week 1. Just 2 quarterbacks threw for more than 300 yards in week 1, including Stafford with the Rams. But I think Geno still gets there if he stays healthy for 17 games. 4,000 yards is an average of 235 yards passing per game. We've seen Michael Penix Jr. thrive at UW under Ryan Grubb's offensive system. I know this is a different ballgame in the NFL, but I think Geno is going to have the ball in his hands more often simply because the offense is going to have the ball more than they have the last couple years. The Seahawks defense could not get off the field the last 2 seasons. They give up 12 to 15 play drives regularly. The Seahawks' time of possession was dead last season. They were 28th 2 seasons ago. When you get more possessions on offense, when you get the ball more in the game, you're going to put up more stats. And I think Geno gets to 4,000 passing yards this season. I will say that that is fair. Finally, we're going to wrap up the show with predictions for this weekend's game. That's coming up next here on the NFC West Huddle. Okay, time to wrap things up here on the NFC West Huddle. Time for predictions this week. I'll also give you the lines so you can pick outright and against the spread. Bailey, we'll start with you. The Niners favored by 5.5 points at the Vikings. Who do you like outright and against the spread, and why?
Yeah, I like the spread. This is a tough one, but I will say I think the final score, I'm going to go 24-21. I think the Niners are going to edge it out. I think it is going to be pretty close. I mean, they have a guy, Justin Jefferson. You may have heard of him a time or two, and I think he's going to be a problem for the Niners defense. But I think this Niners team is just simply too talented. I mean, you look at them on paper and you're like, how are all these guys on one roster? So yeah, I'm taking the Niners in this one. I think they're going to come out on top.
Okay, now to the Rams and the Cardinals. Arizona's actually favored by a point in this one at this point. Gerard, you go first. Who do you like and why?
I'm taking the money line. I like the Rams to win the game outright, 30-24. I think they show that this unit is battle tested. We found that out in week 2, the way they came back against the Lions. As I said, they were a play away from winning that game. They might get Rob Havenstein back at right tackle. That should help shore up that offensive line. They have owned Arizona, particularly in Glendale. And I think they're going to be able to run the ball this week, which is what they have to do. So I'm seeing the Rams scoring 30 points in this game, and they win the game.
Richard, what are you thinking about that one?
I have to agree. You know, the Rams have had the Cardinals number for quite some time now, and the Cardinals' Achilles heel is stopping the run, and the Rams know that, and they've been able to do that against this team for quite some time. So until the Cardinals prove me wrong, I'm going to keep picking against them when they play the Rams, because for some reason, you know, they just seem to have their number, run it down their throats. But the thing that really bothers me is Bailey going fair with Christian McCaffrey, because the Chimichangas have Christian McCaffrey, my fantasy team, and I'm really bummed about that. That's my biggest concern right now.
We have to have a weekly Chimichangas update when it comes to fantasy with Richard's team. Finally, the Seahawks favored by 3.5 points at New England. That line scares me because it says the Hawks would actually be favored by 9.5 points if the game was in Seattle because of a 6-point switch for a change of venue. I think that's too much. The Seahawks should not be favored by close to 10 points against anyone this early in Mike Macdonald's tenure. I think the Hawks still win the game by about a field goal, but I think it's pretty close throughout. I would feel better with the home team and 3.5 points in my back pocket. It only gets tougher for Seattle, by the way, in weeks 3 and 4 with the Dolphins and Lions, so it's kind of important to start the season 2-0 to build that early momentum. And that's going to do it for us. Thanks to all 3 of you for joining us, and we will be back here next Friday, right after the Fox College Football Friday night game between Illinois and Nebraska. Have a great night, everyone.